Hello everybody and welcome to this incredibly fun, I know it is going to be already, Q&A all about the new BBC drama Chloe. I am joined by the amazing cast. We have Erin Doherty, who plays Becky / Sasha. We have Pippa Bennett-Warner, who plays Livia, Billy Howell, who is Elliot, Jack Farthing, who is Richard, Brandon Michael Hall, who is all the way in America. Thank you so much for joining us, Brandon, who plays Josh. And we have Alice Seabright, writer and director of Chloe, and Tally Garner, who is the executive producer. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Brianna, thanks for having us.
It's so exciting. You guys have already kind of been chatting back and forth. You can tell that you had an amazing time recording this. So Alice, let's start with you. Where did the crux of this really twisted story come from?
It is quite twisted, isn't it? I keep realizing how twisted it is. I guess the sort of early conversations that Tally and I had back in, it was late 2017, were sort of around, I think the nugget was always the character of Becky, and basically the idea of digging into someone who lies as a defense mechanism, as a way of kind of covering for actually some quite stuff that we unpeel over the series of like quite low sense of self-worth and like social anxiety and all these different things, and actually lying as a way for her to sort of keep people at a distance and you know, keep sort of not let anyone into her life, and also as a way of actually almost accessing things that she couldn't access as herself. So if, you know, she lies in order to say things she can't say in real life or do things she can't do in real life, and so I think that sort of psychology, I guess, was the initial interest. And then on the other side, it was the idea of obsession and of, you know, kind of one woman's obsession with another and how that relates to her own kind of sense of self and her own identity. And then kind of the death of that, the death of that person being the catalyst to the story of like, you know, digging into who she actually was behind the life that she was presenting, and also piecing together like what happened in the past between them. And then, it was kind of a seed that had enough darkness within it, I guess, that the more you dig, the more you find.
Definitely. Well, people will know your work as a director from Sex Education, but tell us about the move from director to creator, writer and director on Chloe, and what that creative freedom afforded you.
I guess it's a bit of a beast, it's a bit of an undertaking. In a way that, you know, weirdly it felt more like when I was making shorts that I'd also written, and you feel like you're sort of carrying this big rock up a hill, except instead of it being over a period of months, it's a period of years. And basically I'm very tired is the answer, and ready to have to sleep for several months. It's a different experience, but also kind of amazing to be able to do it, and to you kind of end up completely immersed in the story over a very, very long period of time, and that's a huge privilege, basically.
Erin, as an actor, you're already pretending to be someone else, who in this is also pretending to be someone else. So how did you keep those lines clear in your head? Did you have a different setup about how to approach Becky versus Sasha each morning as you were getting into character?
I've spoken about this already today, and I feel like, honestly, the less clear those lines were, the better. Like, I found it really helpful to keep it really blurry, because she's not an actor. Like, she doesn't have training in any way. She's just flung herself into this situation. And personally, I was like, what's actually really interesting about that is watching her try and figure it out on the spot. So I actually tried to, I thought about them as one person, but I didn't think about any particular scene. Like, I didn't label them either which way. In a way, I found it most interesting when they bled into each other, because she has no control over that. And I actually, like, it's a surprising amount of like waking up in this show. I actually found like the waking up moments really fun, because I was like, when you wake up, you're who you are. So I was like, what's that process of like waking up, and you know, whoever you wake up next to, what are you turning on there?
Yeah.
Basically, I didn't think about it at all. Just let it happen.
You did have to do a lot of waking up. I don't
So
know.
many
A lot of waking
waking
up and a lot of eating.
So much eating.
I guess it's just my life.
It was great.
Yeah.
Well, how did you find navigating the accents? Because at least that's something that does differentiate really clearly between Becky at home and Sasha with Friends.
Yeah. Well, I mean, luckily I spent a lot of time in Bristol anyway because I trained there.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent 3 years there, so it wasn't too intense to have to transition between them quite quickly, which often is quite nerve-wracking. But I knew that accent quite well, so it wasn't too daunting. And that's also the beauty of ADR, I suppose, is if you do mess it up, then you can just go back and fix it later on. So it's really boring, but I just didn't really think of I found the messiness really intriguing and really attractive as a character, so I wanted to keep it quite blurry.
And Pippa, I want to come to you because Livia, she has her own business. She's a mother. She has time to do yoga, throw dinner parties. Like, out of everyone, it feels like she's got her life together. But is this just like another surface social media thing, or should we genuinely try to aspire to be Livia?
Oh my God, I'd love to be Livia. He has it all going on. I think there's probably a little bit of both. I remember when I was kind of prepping for the role, I did lots of deep dives on Instagram to kind of, because Instagram isn't my natural happy place, and so to kind of get into the headset of somebody who lives their life through that lens of, oh, I'm having, chia seed. Erin always.
It's chia. It's chia seed.
Chia seed puddings on the gram. So I think there's a little bit of both. I think she has it all, but I also think there's possibly a little bit of a veneer as well, that kind of, that thing when you present, the sort of, I think, weird beauty about Instagram is you're in control of your own narrative and you're in control of what you present. So I think there's a little bit of that going on, but she does also just have it all, and really nice clothes and a house and a Range Rover. Yeah.
She has incredible skirts.
Thank you. Yes, she does. Shout out to Matt Price, our costume designer.
Yeah, they're great.
So good.
She, Liv, is also kind of grieving the loss of one of her best friends. So how do you think that grief comes out in someone like her, who does have a very well-maintained public image?
I don't think she handled grief very well. I think she, over the years, has had loss, or she's got trust issues, and Chloe was her only female friend. The group is just before Becky, Sasha arrives, it's just Liv and the boys. So I think she's one of those people that's very good at doing up the zip and closing the drawbridge and taking a step back, and again, presenting. It's the beauty of being able to hide behind the veneer. But there's something about the relationship that happens, in the relationship with Becky, Sasha, where we start to see, I guess, I suppose a different side of Livia, which was really fun to play.
Billy, I want to come to you. I feel like Elliot is such an enigma. He's really reserved. He's really private. Is that harder to play than somebody who is outgoing and wears their heart on their sleeve?
You mean for me? You could say that, yeah. Reserved. You know what? It's funny because I feel like someone said to me the other day they're pretty sure that I'm a prototype android and that I have only 2 default settings. And one is this introspective, shy, reserved thing, which is what I experience in solitude. So I'm quite comfortable being that way and being quite melancholic and not very forthcoming with how I feel about stuff. But then I guess it's an occupational hazard. We do things like this where I have to talk about it. So
I'm so sorry.
No. But what I'm saying is, I guess that is a sort of becomes a learned behavior, right? And that's okay. So you often find that people who are kind of more introspective, they have to work harder at expressing those things and actually expressing how they feel about any given thing. So I think he's totally multifaceted, as are we all, So was it difficult for me? I mean, I guess it's about daring and it's about courage, although, Erin, I think rightly says, that Sasha isn't an actor, nor is Elliot, but I guess as I said, it goes on for so long that it becomes seamless. Like you don't even notice it anymore. And that becomes your default, the idea that you do adapt to any given situation. So I suppose I was doing the same thing. And that area, that space really interests me, between the actor trying to do the thing and whatever the character is, or whatever behaviors they're displaying.
I mean, you're right. He's not an actor. He's a politician. And for an audience member, that's almost shorthand. I mean, in fiction, at least, don't want to get the RTS sued or anything, for someone who knows how to lie, or at least work the truth to their advantage. So how do you get the audience to trust and like someone in politics from the off?
Well, I think it's a lot of it. I mean, it obviously changes, it evolves over time. But one of the underlying things are actually the same things that made, for instance, Winston Churchill a great orator, right? So the reason it works is because whatever he's saying, and despite the kind of the sort of the conceits, or the rhetorical conceits, like the rule of three, or repetition, and even we heard Tony Blair doing that, saying education, right? I think it was him anyway. But so it kind of sticks with us, and it becomes part of our vernacular, part of our understanding as to how to get a point across. So it sort of seeps into society, through that, and then you see business managers or CEOs using the same rhetoric and the same stuff. But underlying that, I think, is charisma, right? Because if you have like someone who's dead behind the eyes, who's just saying education 3 times, we're not very likely to listen to them, right? Or we just hear the word education, so somehow it goes in and it sticks in our subconscious. So hopefully I brought some level of charisma to Elliot that makes him persuasive in that way, that makes us want to trust him or trust what he's saying. I hope.
You do. You definitely do.
Thank you.
Jack, what impact has Chloe's death had on the group, like the kind of the group dynamics, but especially on Richard? Because I think this comes out even more as the episodes go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's unquantifiable. I think everyone is grieving in some way, and in different ways. I think on the surface, at least, maybe, I guess in the first episode anyway, it might feel like Richard is kind of overtly suffering more, or is handling it less well. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think he definitely wears it more overtly, and is keener not to kind of hide it, keen not to move on, keen not to brush it away, and keen to kind of grieve and like be a grieving kind of entity, that group. I think he is like, I've always felt that he didn't want to grow up, and he wants that group of friends to stay as they were when they were 17, and like when they were 17, they were all that mattered to each other. So he is still in that place. The others have kind of moved on a bit. So it's like, so I think, yeah, definitely at the beginning we find him in a place where he's like looking to share this kind of loud grief, but everyone's handling it in different ways. That's, of course they do. So he's struggling with that, I think.
Why do you think that he is so suspicious of Sasha when the rest of the group are kind of welcoming this change, or at least a breath of fresh air?
Well, I think a few reasons. I think superficially, in the first instance, he thinks he recognizes her, so there's something. But I think actually it's more about his ownership over the group, and he feels like he wants this group to be this group. And it's kind of what I was just saying about how he doesn't want it to change, how he needs it. Certainly feels like he needs it more than some of the others. And she's a total outsider, and we're going through this like cataclysmic moment of like togetherness, and there's someone else having dinner with us, and it's like, I mean, what are we? I mean, it was very easy for me to find my way into his perspective at that dinner. Particularly, I was like, this is madness. What are we all doing, pretending? Richard feels like, in a show about people pretending and whether or not things are true or not, Richard does feel like one of the more honest people, in that he doesn't want to hide. He wants to sort of say it how it is, and he wants people to stop like niceties, kind of express a bit more.
Brandon, I kind of feel safe for Becky when Josh is on screen, because he kind of becomes like a confidant. So what is it about Josh that Becky kind of trusts more than anybody else, I think, that we see her interact with on screen?
I think it's mainly the fact that, can you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you.
It's mainly the fact that that he knows, that he knows like a secret, and she's okay with him having that information. But yeah, I think it's just the fact that they have like a camaraderie with each other. That just helps with that.
And why does he kind of put up with that? Because you think if somebody knows your secret, that's the most exposing, frightening thing. But why do you think that he understands her motivations?
I think he understands her motivations because he sees the hurt and the pain that she's going through. He believes that he can save her, So Josh is one of those characters that sees the through line, the silver lining in other people. And so he sees that in Becky. And yeah, I think that's why they have the best factor with each other.
And like I said, it feels like she can be, herself with Josh. So how did you and Erin work together on their friendship and intimacy?
It was amazing. It was like from the jump. I mean, Erin and I's first scene was very. It was like, "Hello, nice to meet you." And here's our. Yeah. It's easy acting with Erin because it's it's two actors who went through training, and at the same time, like, we both know how to let that go. So it's fun. It was absolutely fun. It was amazing. It was so fun to work with her.
You two do have like great chemistry. You are clearly having so much fun, which feels so important. When the rest of the scenes feels tense, it's finally a relaxing time.
I remember actually there was one, because we did everything in like two or 3 days or something, and there was one of the first scene, not the first scene, but like a scene from episode 2, like an early scene that was at the end of the shooting, and we'd been having so much fun that we started the scene, and at one point I was like, guys, we're having too much fun, this is early on. Reel it back, because it's true that it got quite, there was just an ease that developed, which actually by the time we were working on the early scenes was like too much too soon kind of thing.
I love it.
She gave us the freedom to play. She constantly told us, this is a script, but also just play within this world. Okay. So I like go back to that the scene when Erin and I are in the bar and we're playing the foosball.
I loved that.
You guys were mad. I think you were both absolutely exhausted, and so it was this like scene where it was just, there was no, I'd call cut and they'd still be playing football and we'd still be like shouting at each other and like whatever. It's like there's no difference between the scene and what's actually going on here.
I would say there's something of a placebo effect when you're drinking alcohol in a scene, like, because we were drinking beer and playing like table football, so we were just like gone. But it was great.
Yeah, we had that. Jack, do you remember as well on the first day of shooting when you and Poppy were dancing to the Smiths, and
we got
drinking non-alcoholic beer, and within half an hour they were like, we're wasted. Even though it's non-alcoholic, there's just something that happens in your brain that just overrides them.
The Smiths and non-alcoholic beer equals drunk.
Yeah, I mean, you'd need to drink when you're listening to the Smiths, to be fair. We've touched upon the fact that it's set in Bristol. Tally, why is Bristol so fantastically intrinsic to this particular friendship group?
Well, I think there was one thing that was really sort of a real pleasure, was being able to film in Bristol and it kind of be Bristol and not have to pretend that we were, in London or somewhere else, that actually we could really celebrate Bristol and sort of use Bristol. And I think Bristol felt like, for this friendship group, this felt like a world where they really could exist in, and it was big enough and kind of had the space for their ambitions and for their kind of that sense of a friendship group that had grown out of the city and actually was now a big part of the city and using the city. And we go to the art world, and we're in the world of politics and music and all these great things that Bristol kind of has, and a real identifiers, I think, of Bristol. And then the flip side of that as well is that it really has, Becky's world. And I think Bristol is a city where, in terms of when you think about kind of class, it has quite distinctive areas within it that we could then really ground, you know, Becky on the outskirts of Bristol living with her mom, and then, you know, Livia and Elliot and, you know, their fabulous houses. And so that was something the city really gave us for the characters.
I think that the conversation about class is such an important, interesting one in this, because we do see all aspects of affluence and, you know, as you say, the sort of more run down areas. So how does the programme explore that through social media being almost aspirational for people who aren't able to kind of access that kind of stuff?
I think that was something right from the very beginning. I think when Alice and I were sort of first chatting about that character, there was something about social media kind of having become a place where you sort of present yourself, like your public face somehow, and that the sort of boundary between public and private was sort of blurring in the world of social media, and that actually your kind of private self could be very different to the self that you're kind of portraying and putting out there. And that works, I think, not necessarily just across class, but in all sorts of different ways. I think that the boundary between public and private on social media felt like it was already was blurring, and that felt really interesting to explore for a character like Becky, who's kind of almost living the sort of social media kind of face as Sasha and presenting herself in that way. And we also spoke a lot about kind of getting behind that and having empathy and sympathy for the person you're hiding as well, and who that person is and why you need to hide them. I think, as Alice, you spoke about from the top, that sense of the kind of pretense actually masking, and in fact we all spoke about this, masking something that you feel maybe people don't want to see or might not like as much. And I think one of the things the show really looks at is the fact that Sasha is able to work and operate and move in a world that perhaps Becky might not be able to as Becky. And I think it doesn't necessarily provide answers, but I think it definitely looks at social mobility in that way. Absolutely. And how things are different for Sasha than for Becky, even though arguably, as Erin was saying, they're the same, you know, they're the same person. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think that's totally right, and it speaks as well to the theme of like the narratives that people tell about themselves and about other people in relation to class and into social media. It's like, you know, Becky's creating Sasha because she knows that Sasha is the character that will seduce Livia and Elliot and Richard and Phil, and that will be accepted with open arms into that world. Because if she came in as Becky, who cares for her mum with dementia and lives in the flat that she lives in and whatever, and who's a temp, she's not getting in, you know. So there's that as well. It's like, how do you present yourself in relation to, you know, and the kind of thing of like, you know, she listens to podcasts and then she regurgitates the lines. It's kind of an extreme version of what all of us do sometimes. You know, you read a review and you say that it's your opinion, or, you know, you whatever, like, you know, people kind of using social currency or using kind of putting on a pretense or displaying a certain way of being as a way of fitting in, because that's what it's all about, really. It's like belonging and fitting in and trying to access in groups and worlds and stuff that you want to be a part of.
I love that podcast line. That was such a kind of really clever, quick way of making us all go, oh, I do that. At the heart of this story is Chloe, who we haven't really talked about yet, who is a woman who took her own life. So how did you research the portrayal and sort of pin down the portrayal of something that is so tragic and so sensitive?
Yeah, obviously it's a really, really, really important thing to handle sensitively and, you know, with the kind of depth and nuance that it deserves. So, you know, we talked a lot about it in the writers' room and across the whole process, and we also talked a lot with the Samaritans, who kind of consulted with them on the project from the, you know, read the scripts and provided feedback and all of that, and, you know, just generally did research into those things. But I think, you know, there's a lot, I'd say that a lot of the themes and the exploration of the grief of all of the characters actually is deeply related to that, because like, for example, you know, Becky has these recurring, I think there's just 2 in episode 1, but there's one in each, at least 1 in each episode, sometimes 2, these recurring phone calls that she imagines of like, what if we call them the what if phone calls. So, you know, what if she'd picked up the phone, what would Chloe have said? And, you know, that's a huge part of the quite complicated grief that can come in the aftermath of that, of just this kind of going over what could I have done, and how could things have been differently. And, you know, definitely it was something that we wanted to kind of get into the real emotions behind that. And, you know, even just the friendship between Livia and Becky or Sasha, I think that there's a huge amount of bonding that happens over those shared feelings. Equally with Elliot, I think Elliot and Becky are bonding on a level of like their shared emotions around this person, even though, and the funny thing is, like, neither Elliot nor Livia nor Richard nor really any of the characters know how closely they're bonding over that. Obviously they think they're bonding in an indirect way, but actually that's, again, you know, it's what glues all of the characters together, I think. So yeah, it's a huge, and I hope we've handled it sensitively and, you know, as it deserves to be. But it was definitely something we were incredibly mindful of.
Yeah, and I think, as Alice said, the Samaritans were fantastic. So they read drafts of the scripts and gave us feedback.
And watch cuts as well.
And watch cuts and kind of gave notes on shots. So, because we were very mindful as well of not, it shows that look at a death by suicide, I think you have to also be very mindful of the audience and of a responsibility, not just to the way you're treating it on screen, but also a responsibility to vulnerable people in the audience who are watching it. And that and so the Samaritans were really incredibly helpful at helping us navigate that, so that we kind of met, or hopefully have met, that responsibility to the audience as well. So
something else that this touches on kind of really brilliantly is about Becky being a carer for her mother. So Erin, from your perspective, did you do any research into the kind of pressures that Becky would have been under to be kind of like the primary carer, and the isolation that she might have been feeling to make her go to the lengths that she ends up going to? Yeah,
that was actually, for me, that was, to be fair, that's probably the biggest day. Like, my favourite part of what we do is the prep. And there was a day, like, when I was thinking a lot about where Becky was at and everything, and thinking particularly about her mum and her relationship with her. And I just kind of had a breakthrough when I realised that essentially she's, with the situation that her mum is in, particularly with early onset, the frame of mind that Becky is in is she's essentially waiting to fall off the face of the earth, because when her mum forgets her, she doesn't have anyone else in her life. So she kind of ceases to exist. So that, for me, was like, oh, okay, the penny dropped about why she's so desperate to escape from her own reality. Because, so in a sense, she hasn't quite taken over the kind of carer role yet. And it's that fear of like, oh, okay, when I do that, I'm gone, pretty much. She's gone and I'm gone. And it's that, and that for me, I was like, okay, I get it. Like, if I was in her shoes, I'd be running from it. Like, that's terrifying. Yeah, so that for me was a huge breakthrough, just putting myself in that frame of mind.
So where did that prep and that research take you then? Did you have conversations with people? Was this kind of like online stuff?
I mean, it was, to be fair, I researched a lot about early onset, but also a lot of it was done with Lisa. Like, Lisa was phenomenal to work with, and we weren't like, we were still like bubbling and stuff, so we got some like Zoom sessions and stuff to with Alice to really just mine the text and to really figure out exactly what these things mean. And when, even in like when you're saying like mum, even like in that one word, that can, the amount of history that can come with that kind of exchange, like you have to put in the work there. So for me, a lot of it was, once I'd done the research about the actual early onset, a lot of it was more about the things that go unsaid. Because it's such a kind of, I feel like being a carer and being cared for.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your communication is non-verbal, and that provided like the richness that we got to hit the ground running with when we started filming.
Pippa, you kind of get a sense that a lot of the characters are hiding things, but I just didn't get that so much with Liv. She sort of feels like an open book. Was that your view of her initially, and does that sort of shift as the episodes continue?
Yeah, I think there's a really lovely quality to Livia, that she is really open and really trusting, but as soon as she feels there might be a little bit of movement in that, she's quite quick to shut up shop, if that makes sense. But also happy to discuss anything. I mean, it's really difficult because I don't want to give anything away, but her journey throughout the season was a really interesting one, and one that I don't want to give anything away. It's so difficult.
Sorry, I don't want to put you in a difficult spot.
So difficult, but she, I think we really see her come to terms with stuff, which I don't think she's necessarily had to do before. So I think these are new things that she's experiencing, which as an actor is great, because you're with this character and you're learning how to process information for the first time, and
And in terms of the playfulness of the script that you've been talking about, how much was that, were you able to kind of have a bit of fun with it with Livia?
Well, I have to say, Alice is so generous, and there is that thing, when you work with a writer-director who's had this in their brain for years, you might think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to have ownership. The characters are hers, but she was so cool and generous. I remember having a Zoom with her, and she was like, "No, Pippa, Livia is yours." Really firmly passed the baton, and you just relax automatically. Okay, shit, now I've got to.
Only possible, may I say, when you've cast the correct people. No, but it's true, because I think that's the beauty, is that when you find the right person, and you not just the talented performers, but also who kind of understand the character on a deep level, it puts you in it put me in trust as well, of going, well, I trust these people to know these characters, and to kind of deepen that, to bring life to them, to deepen them, to kind of and so one thing that I do love with being able to direct something that you've written is that actually the preciousness can go away, because weirdly, if it's someone else's writing, you're like, well, I can't change that line, whereas if it's mine, if it's not working, it's like, chuck it out. And and I also think that doing a take where you can veer off of it, or changing lines or whatever, suddenly that feels, it's like it's just another phase of the rewrite, and in a way the constant rewrite that goes on all the way until the edit. So but it's contingent on having the right people to collaborate with.
Billy, in a world that is obsessed by social media, is that something that doesn't come so naturally to Elliot? As we were talking about, he likes his kind of bubble, so how difficult is it for him to kind of have that public facing persona in a program like this?
Well, there's a couple of layers to this. One is that I personally have always been a bit allergic to it, social media, that is. But I've had to overcome this allergy, and unfortunately, there's no doctor really, except for maybe publicists, who can help you with that. And there's nothing they can really prescribe except to just practice. And the idea, for me personally, the actor Billy, of practicing social media makes me want to be sick. So I just think that there is time. It's not necessarily time well spent. However, having said that, I do understand why it's there and why it can be useful, why it can be beneficial to us. And actually, it's brought me in touch with people in my life who I haven't seen for a very, very long time, and so I can see all the pros, and I totally get that. So I'm sort of behind that aspect of it, and I'm behind the connectivity of it. So then in terms of Elliot, of course, I had to have a more kind of deep-rooted understanding of it. I mean, Elliot is someone who started a tech company with someone, right? So he's going to really understand this stuff from its kind of nascent years all the way through to where it is when we meet Elliot, And why that's an interesting tool for him in terms of networking and staying connected to the right people, and putting out messages, sometimes quite subtle, nuanced messages into the ether about his own personal life and how he wishes to be perceived by other people. Because let's face it, that garners favor, right? And so for a politician, that can be incredibly useful. So seeing that as a sort of marketing tool, but it's all really, for me, and again, this is Billy speaking, comes under the banner of some form of manipulation. And that's the part of it that makes me feel slightly uncomfortable. Because I know we do that in our actual social lives anyway, right? I mean, we have to put on masks in order to go to social events. Some people are more introverted and socially awkward or anxious than other people are. And even the people who we see or perceive to be the most confident are often having to work really hard. I think I used this analogy earlier today, but it's like a duck swimming, right? What we don't see is what's under the water. We don't see its legs frantically going like this, right? All we see is this sort of graceful bird floating across this tranquil water. And so that's it for me. That's kind of how it functions. So I think it's important to sometimes just peek behind the veil, right? And what you really want to do is get to know the real person, not the Instagram version of them. But it was really fun to play with as an actor, because it does give you these like new facets, these kind of hyper real versions of these characters, which gives you another element to play or to kind of use or utilize or mine on. It's great.
And Jack, what about Richard? What is his background? Because we only really sort of see him in his downtime in the first episode, but then we find out a bit more about his interests as the series goes on. So what kind of perspective were you coming from in terms of what he was all about?
Yeah, well, he's kind of, he feels like a bit of a lone thing to me. It always did. Like, I mean, his dad will feature, and I don't think it's, yeah, I mean, his dad is is in politics, and actually that's in Net 1, isn't it, that he comes up?
Yeah.
But he's clearly got a slightly fractured relationship with his parents. For me, it always felt, and I remember talking to Alice, like it always felt like mum was no longer about, and probably like died at a formative age, and he's been left with a dad who he doesn't really get on with, and he kind of feels like quite alone, but he's in that curious position of being given a lot and not really knowing what to do with it. So he has a bougie flat, he doesn't really have a job, he has a kind of interest in music, and but doesn't really know where to put it to make himself feel good about what he's doing. So he's kind of floating and lost a little bit, and then I think, you know, although he has this flat, he doesn't really have like, he doesn't feel like he's got income. So he's got kind of some means, but not really much else. And so he's reliant, I think, is what's crucial about him. He's reliant on a lot of people, emotionally, but also logistically. And he's not really self-determining and self-propelling, which I guess is why he's so desperate for things not to change, because there's, you know, with any change, there's like fear of, and I think he kind of lives on I don't know, it's kind of like he's got nothing to lose. It's kind of like he doesn't really care, but also he's forever on a line of like not really knowing if he's going to fall over or not. If he just feels quite fragile.
Well, yeah, I mean, even physically, your body language is quite hunched when you're playing Richard. You're kind of head down quite a lot, almost hiding a little bit. Can you talk about getting into the headspace of, like, you know, when you're waking up, how are you kind of physically stepping into that character?
Yeah, that's probably how I wake up. I mean, that's me. That's how I start the day. Anything else is like an effort. No, he definitely, like, he didn't feel like, I mean, I'm not like Richard, but there are definitely things that we share, and I definitely brought a bunch of me, maybe more than I thought, you know, to him. And it felt very accessible, his kind of state of mind to me. Like, there are definitely, you know, like there are things that have happened to him that have happened to me. There is stuff that I knew. I felt like I knew this guy. I felt like he you know, he was definitely there. I could like touch him. It wasn't like I was traveling for miles to find him.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things why I like really loved reading it, is because a lot of these characters felt like that. They felt like I'd met them and or that I'd heard about them. I just felt like they were so real and alive and contemporary. And so yeah, as I said earlier, like about something, it felt more for this is about taking things off before we started rather than putting anything on. Like, it felt like he's emotional. You have to show up and be vulnerable and be happy to you know, be more honest about how you're feeling than like Jack might be, and just accept that's going to be your way in rather than a kind of hat that you might be wearing.
Right. Brandon, as the only American in the cast, tell us about the sort of insights that you got from the kind of UK script writing, TV making, and the kind of story of this group of friends in the UK. How was it coming to that from an American perspective?
It was absolutely great. I didn't feel out of place in any shape, form, or fashion. But no, there's no, I don't think there was much of a difference. And I think the biggest part of that is that, you know, Corona was happening. Jesus. But yeah, Corona was happening at the time. So we're all still trying to figure out how to be on a film set. So I think it was no different than doing anything over here. It's just beautiful. It's just nice. And to finally shoot something out of the country.
So was that your first time shooting out of the
shooting out of the country? Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. So what did you love so much about Alice's writing? You know, what did tempt you over to this side of the pond, and about the character of Josh in particular?
It very much goes to what was just said, is that we know those characters, you know, on the page. Alice is such a amazing writer of bringing real personalities and characters to the script. And she's also very cool with saying, like, if that's not how it sounds, or if that's not how it would be said, say it the way that you would. Because she trusts us, you know. But Alice is a brilliant writer. She knows how people talk and how they communicate. And that for an actor to have that type of dialogue to do his homework, because at the end of the day, when you come in, it's just seamless, you know, page very easily. So yeah.
It sounds like a lot of people on the panel kind of built up this backstory that we might not necessarily see all of during the series. So for you, for Josh, did you work with Alice to kind of get something in mind of what brought him to this place and time?
Actually, it goes back to your last question of why Alice is such an amazing writer, is because remember the part about his mom. Remember we talked about whether we should keep that part in about his mother, and Alice and I had an amazing conversation about why that part, you know, makes so much sense to the character of Josh. And for me,
we built actually some of that backstory out together.
Okay.
We built some of that backstory out together, in fact, Brandon. You know, we had conversations which informed some of the writing even.
So that was, I mean, that's an ode to, you know, the collaboration that Alice has with making this project. But yeah, with my own backstory, what we were able to create, and then what I was able to bring to it, was able to create Josh.
Tally, we are kind of in an age where we are getting so many sort of murder mysteries, police procedurals on our screens. What was it about this story that just kind of grabbed you and thought, yes, this is what audience are going to find really refreshing? Because I tell you, I really did. It was it really just felt like, oh my goodness, finally something else.
Oh, well, that's brilliant, Rihanna. I'm so pleased to hear that. And in truth, I sort of didn't think it on those terms at all. I think it was more that I was just utterly fascinated by, you know, Becky, Sasha, and as this friendship group evolved, they kept giving us more and more sort of story, and they kind of grew and got, you know, their lives got bigger and more interesting, and it really came about, especially as, you know, this is this is an original which kind of has come from Alice's brain, which is kind of amazing to think about, that actually, you know, she's built this whole world and all these characters and all their backstories. You know, that is something that's all original. And I think the thing that I really responded to was how exciting that was to sort of meet people again, like everyone's been saying, that I felt like I knew, that I hadn't seen before on screen, that felt really modern, that felt like it was speaking to some of the big themes that we're all wrestling with in our own lives, in terms of, you know, the way social media works, how we present ourselves to other people, the way that people, you know, the way human beings consistently lie and why we do that, and what's sitting behind that, and how to find empathy for people who are sort of figuring all that out. They all felt like, you know, big exciting themes that really spoke to me. So the fact that they speak to you as well, Ariana, is just absolutely brilliant. But yeah, it didn't really come about feeling like the audience needed this. It was more that I needed this and I hope that other people would need this. So, and I think the response from everybody, from all the amazing cast, from our crew, it really felt like people, this wasn't just a job, like people loved, you know, they loved Alice, they loved the show, they, you know, they really loved it, and kind of it was a much deeper connection than another TV cop drama, or, you know, or anything else. You know, it was a different kind of show that we were trying to build together, I think.
And finally, Alice, when you're kind of, you know, you've been working on this for how many years, and certainly intensely as you're trying to kind of get it to past the finish line, but when you're thinking about the people watching it, the audience, what are you always trying to bring it back to? What is like the kind of overriding message that you want to get through? What is your kind of ultimate aim with a show like this?
I think I guess it's, well, because in a way the premise or whatever allows like a gajillion different themes to come in, which is what's really interesting, that you can kind of go through them and list them, or think about different scenes or different sequences that explore different ones. But I think more like the North Star from the beginning was about getting in Becky's head, and making it feel like you're in her shoes and you're experiencing things through her point of view, because then, you know, that allows you to like, in a way, I think that the themes kind of presented themselves, and you just end up going down the rabbit holes of things that you're interested in and things that you're excited in. But I don't think I necessarily have an overarching idea of what the meaning is, or what the message is, or even clearly what it's about. I think it's about lots of different things, and I can identify some of those, but I think what was clear throughout was this is the story that's told through Becky's point of view, and so you have to make the audience feel what it feels to be her, and that literally carries through everything. It carries through, you know, from how it's shot to how it's edited to how it's sound designed to how it's whatever. And so, you know, you're meeting all of the multiple characters that populate the world through her kind of point of view on them, and they're revealing themselves to you, you know, as she learns more about them, you learn more about them. And the kind of, it's also, I think, what explains the slightly odd tone, I guess, which is, you know, it kind of goes through these different like spaces, that it's, you know, it's sometimes really dark, sometimes really emotional, sometimes fun, weird and funny, and sometimes tense and stressful. Again, it's because that's what life feels like in that moment to Becky. So I think that was the clear through line, and everything else, you know, is shifting and you know, is explored, but not, I hope it poses lots of questions and explores lots of things, but I don't know how many answers it provides, basically.
Well, there's a reason to keep watching. For everybody watching at home, you will love Chloe as much as I did, I'm sure, and you can see all 6 episodes out in early Feb. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your very generous answers.
Thank you, Ren.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.